In folklore, the doppelganger is a strange entity, a biologically unrelated copy, physical and perhaps even mental, of a living person. The concept appears in the mythology and traditions of many cultures throughout human history. Whilst two unrelated people can look uncannily alike, the doppelganger is said to be something other, a paranormal being that is an apparition of a living person, a spirit double, or, as the literal translation of the German word states, a double walker or double goer. Undeniably an unnerving concept, in some of the most sinister tales of doppelgangers, these beings are claimed to stalk their earthly counterpart in the hopes of taking their place, and may even be a servant of death itself. The belief that doubles are omens of death is widespread. Someone who is said to have experienced such a prophetic doppelganger is Percy Bysshe Shelley. One of the major English romantic poets of the 19th century, Shelley moved to Italy in 1818 with his wife, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, the author of the Gothic classic Frankenstein. They spent time living in different parts of the country, and in the summer of 1822, the Shelleys were living in a villa near Lerici, on the shores of the Bay of La Spezia. Shortly after arriving there, it is said that Percy began to experience a series of strange visions. He related his experiences to his wife in the early hours of the 23rd of June after suffering a terrible nightmare. According to a letter Mary wrote to her friend about the matter only a couple of weeks later, Percy had seen a figure of himself which met him as he walked on the terrace of their villa. The figure was, he claimed, his own image, a doppelganger. When it approached him, he claimed that it spoke, asking him, "How long do you mean to be content?" Terrifyingly, this wasn't the first time that Shelley had claimed to have encountered such a figure. Shelley, only 29 years old, suffered from a chronic lung complaint and was often ill, as well as experiencing periods of depression. It was thought that his visions were hallucinations caused by his ill health. And yet, the figure he saw on the terrace was not so, for Shelley was not the only one who saw his duplicate. In his wife's letter, Mary explained that Jane Williams, a close friend who lived with the couple, also saw Percy's doppelganger. Described by Mary as a woman of sensibility who was not in the slightest degree nervous, Jane reported seeing Shelley pass by the window she was standing at, a usual route for Percy, only to pass again shortly afterwards, heading in the very same direction. Jane had not moved from the window, and on account of a 20-foot wall, the only way Shelley could have come back was to have passed in front of the window again, and yet he had not. As such, it seemed to Jane as if there had been two of him. Only a few short days after Percy related his strange encounters to his wife, on the 8th of July, he met his end whilst sailing the Bay of La Spezia. A storm and the inexperience of the crew caused his boat to sink, lost forever beneath the waves. Shelley's badly decomposed body washed ashore 10 days later. Was his untimely demise presaged by the appearance of his doppelganger? Some of the most convincing cases of doppelgangers are those witnessed by those other than the duplicated person. In fact, in very rare instances, the duplicated person is completely unaware of the existence of their double. In 1845, a 32-year-old teacher by the name of Émilie Saget started working at a private all-girls French language school in Latvia. A talented and well-liked member of the teaching staff, there was no reason for anything strange or otherworldly to be connected to Saget. And yet, before too long, her students noticed something very peculiar about their new teacher, with her ultimately finding herself at the eye of a hurricane of rumour and speculation. There were, after all, as it was claimed by the students, not one, but two Émilie Sagets. The strange story can be traced back to one particular lesson, when Saget turned to write on the chalkboard. With her back to the class, it is said that a second Saget appeared, unseen by the first, and started mimicking the original's movements. The two women not only looked the same, but acted the same also. Another incident occurred on an evening when Sage ate in the dining hall, and her double yet again manifest, mirroring her actions once more. Before too long, the appearances happened more frequently. It is even claimed that on one occasion, on a hot summer's day the following year, the entire student body of 42 girls witnessed the appearance of Sage's doppelganger during a sewing lesson. They were being taught by a different teacher at the time, with the real Sage outside in the school's garden. Her double, it is claimed, appeared when the sewing teacher left the room to speak to a colleague. She is said to have just stared at the girls, wordless and terrifying. Perhaps the most ominous element of this case is, however, the fact that Sage never once witnessed her own double. Whilst it could be argued that the children were playing a mean practical joke by consistently claiming to have seen a duplicate of their teacher, what is more difficult to explain is how Sage, whilst never seeing her doppelganger, did seem to be aware of its presence in a physical way. It is said that when the figure would appear, the colour would drain from the teacher's face, and she would be overcome with fatigue, to the point that her movements became listless, almost as if her spirit double was draining her life force whenever it came near. Ultimately, it is claimed that Sage was fired from her job, the persistent appearance of her doppelganger simply too frightening for the school to tolerate. According to some reports, the tormented teacher held 18 different teaching positions in just 16 years, suggesting that her duplicate continued to stalk her wherever she went. One paranormal explanation for doppelgangers is that, far from being a malevolent spirit entity, these figures are merely versions of ourselves that exist in another dimension. They are, in short, a bleed-through from a parallel universe. What might cause such a bleed-through to occur is, of course, unknown. However, such an explanation does suggest that whilst the manifestation of a double may appear sinister, it is rather more mundane, and quite possibly entirely harmless. Even so, that has not stopped people who have encountered so-called doppelgangers from being shocked or even fearful by what they have seen. In 1905, Sir Frederic Carne Rasch, a British politician and Member of Parliament, fell ill with influenza. Bedridden and too sick to work, his fellow members did not expect to see him at a planned parliamentary debate shortly before Easter. As such, many were shocked when Rasch was seen at the House of Commons, present and very much healthy. What followed was a series of strange reports made by a number of politicians, later reported on by several local and national newspapers. An article published in Drury's Derby Mercury, dating from May 1905, described how MP Sir Gilbert Parker saw his friend Rasch out of his place in the House of Commons, and then by the position he occupied. Knowing that he had been very ill, Parker was surprised to see him, and so nodded at Rasch cheerfully and asked him if he was feeling better. Rasch did not reply, and made no sign. Parker considered this to be odd, and explained that his friend's position was his, and yet not his. Whilst the figure clearly looked to be Rasch, his expression was steely, his face remarkably pallid, and his whole demeanour grim. Confused by his strange behaviour, Parker turned away and continued his business. When, only a moment later, he turned back towards Rasch, he was gone. Puzzled and a little unnerved, he at once went in search of him, expecting to find him in the lobby. However, he was not there either. After quizzing multiple people present at the house, Parker was surprised to discover no one else had seen Rasch, or so he thought. A letter from Colonel Sir Arthur Hayter, written on the 13th of May and published in the Daily News on the 17th, stated that he too had seen Rasch at the House of Commons when he was lying ill at home. According to the letter, Hayter confirmed that he not only saw Sir Carne Rasch sitting below the gangway, not in his usual seat, but that he called the attention of another MP, Sir Henry Campbell Bannerman, saying that he wondered why all the papers inserted notices of Sir Carne Rasch's illness when he was sitting opposite, apparently quite well. Sir Henry, it is said, looked at Rasch and replied that he hoped his illness was not catching. As far as both Hayter and Campbell Bannerman were concerned, Rasch was without a doubt present at Parliament that day. All in all, Rasch's grim double, as the figure became known, was noticed by at least 3 members of the Commons. Later, when Rasch learned about his supposed doppelganger, he confirmed that he had not been in his place at Westminster at the time, and had indeed been ill. In fact, contrary to what some thought at the time, he made a full recovery and did not die until several years later. Rasch is instead said to have taken the peculiar incident in his stride, and when he spoke with Parker later, who had been very concerned, believing the apparition he saw to have been an omen of Rasch's impending death, accepted his congratulations upon having not died, went home, told the story, and supposedly made everyone in his family appropriately miserable that he had not succumbed to the influenza. Could it then be that far from being a harbinger of death, Rasch's grim double was instead a version of himself, continuing his work in a parallel world ever so slightly different from our own, where Rasch did not fall ill, and although still an MP, sat in a different seat in the House of Commons. Whilst not everyone who sees or has their doppelgangers seen meets their end soon afterwards, there are enough reports of such allegedly happening for people to fear encountering their double. In this way, those who believe in the power of the spirit double warn against trying to communicate with them if you do encounter one, stating that such an interaction could have terrible, unintended consequences. One of the first books to popularize the term doppelganger was Catherine Crowe's 1848 book on paranormal phenomena, The Night Side of Nature. In her book, Crowe explores the idea of the human soul having the ability to unanchor itself from the physical body whilst in a state of trance or catalepsy, with the freed spirit being as the spirits of the actual dead, free to roam and, if it so chooses, interact with others. Most commonly, it is surmised, one would find themselves able to perform such an act of bilocation when close to death. One well-known case referenced in Crowe's book of such a thing allegedly happening involved John Donne, the English metaphysical poet and scholar born in 1572. The year was 1612, and Donne, who was serving as a member of Parliament at the time, was in Paris at the embassy. His wife, Anne, was at home in England and was soon to give birth to their child. 2 days after his arrival in Paris, Donne dined at the embassy with his friend Sir Robert and several others. After eating, Donne was left alone in the room for about half an hour. When Sir Robert returned, he is said to have found Donne changed from earlier, sitting alone in a state of considerable agitation. Donne, it is claimed, went on to tell his friend that he had seen a dreadful vision. He had watched Anne pass twice by him in the room, her hair hanging about her shoulders and a dead child in her arms. Sir Robert was shocked by what Donne had told him and replied that he must have fallen asleep in the time he was gone from the room and had some sort of melancholy dream. Donne, however, was immovable. He had seen his wife and couldn't be surer, stating that Anne had even stopped and looked him in the face before vanishing. As is to be expected after encountering such a terrible apparition, Donne was worried for his wife. After much suffering, he received information from England that, whilst Anne was now well, she had delivered a stillborn child. Stranger still, the delivery had taken place at the time her husband had seen her in Paris. Whilst in a state of considerable physical and spiritual exertion, had Anne's spirit left her body and travelled to be with her husband to seek comfort and perhaps even inform him of the tragedy. Donne's encounter with his wife's double is perhaps one of the most well-known historical doppelganger cases, being reported on as early as 1675 in a biography of Donne. In the time since, no one has been able to categorically disprove what he saw. Before we explore our final case, I just want to say a few things about my YouTube membership, in particular the exciting launch of a new perk, my custom Emojam emojis. Available to all membership tiers, my alien-themed emojams were created in partnership with Emojam to bring you 3 super exciting, super wacky animated emojis. What makes these emojams extra special is that they also have sound, voiced by me. Have you seen anything unusual? Take me to your leader. You can use these exclusive audio emojams in chat apps like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and iMessage. All you have to do is download the Emojam app, the link to which is in the description, sign in with your YouTube account to link your YouTube membership, and enjoy. To make this launch extra special, I'm offering one of the 3 emojams free for everyone to use, so you don't have to be a member to try it out. If you like it and are interested in using the more exclusive emojams, please consider becoming a member and take a look at all of the other perks which could be available to you, including exclusive loyalty badges next to your name in the comments section and streaming access to my documentary In Search of the Dead. To summarise, I really hope you like this new perk and have fun using these wacky gifts in your messages. Now, let us continue. When writing about doppelgangers in 1848, Crow stated that whatever the cause for their manifestation, encounters with doubles happen in all places and to a great variety of people. It could be argued that such a statement has never been truer. A simple online search reveals innumerable personal testimonies of disturbing encounters with doubles. Not merely uncanny lookalikes, but doubles of the sinister, supernatural variety. Some of the most unnerving encounters are those which involve replicas of loved ones. Such a story comes from a Reddit user by the name of Gilbert, who claimed that one Sunday morning, they and their family received an unexpected knock on the door of their apartment. The floor above was empty, and so no one should have been at the door. Moving to the window that looked out to the door, they were surprised to see their father on the other side, trying to get into the apartment. As they went to unlock the door to let him in, they state that their mother rushed towards them and pulled them away from the door, clearly distressed, looking out the window also, and telling her child to go to the farthest room in the apartment and to not come out. The man at the door, the poster claims, was not their father, for he was asleep in the room next door. By the time he was woken up, his double at the door had started knocking, seemingly determined to get inside the apartment. Despite asking the figure who he was, there was no reply. He is said to have simply stood there, staring, waiting to be let in. The real father prepared to confront his sinister double with a baseball bat, but by the time he opened the door, the figure was supposedly gone. Whilst it is, of course, impossible to verify this testimony, with many undoubtedly skeptical of paranormal experiences being shared online in this way, the phenomena as a whole is difficult to ignore. Everywhere you go, all across the world and throughout time, there are claims of doppelgangers, both benign and malevolent. Arguably, the doppelganger is one of the most terrifying supernatural entities one can imagine encountering, for it challenges our very sense of self, most especially when others, those who love us as individuals, are taken in by the double, believing it to be the true version of ourselves. Such instances make explanations of mistaken identity, which many cases can be explained away as being, more difficult to believe. How can partners, friends, siblings, and even parents who know the real person intimately be so fooled by another person who simply resembles the original? That is the issue with an ultimate, conclusive explanation, and what makes the following alleged experience, shared by a woman who claims her doppelganger was trying to replace her, so terrifying. Shared in 2015 and reported on by multiple media outlets, the story was originally posted as a partially fictionalized account of allegedly true happenings. Since then, in 2018, the experiencer has come forward with an unembellished, supposedly truthful version. According to the woman's revised testimony, many members of her family saw her double, believing it to be her. Instances include her husband seeing her at home when she was at work, and even her infant son being taken in by the doppelganger when it appeared in his room and began singing him a lullaby. The woman and her husband, she claims, heard the singing from another room. When she went to investigate, she heard footsteps running away from her son's room and found him upset. He was confused as to why she had stopped singing and left so suddenly. He fully believed that the figure who sang to him was his mother. As time went by, it is said to have become increasingly obvious to the woman that her double, whatever it was seeking to replace her. She claims that she never actually did get a good look at whatever was haunting her family, but that it created much chaos and trauma, including her son suffering from night terrors for several months. Eventually, the encounters simply stopped and the doppelganger was gone. Unless, of course, it wasn't, and it had actually achieved its intention, of infiltrating and replacing the original. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you also to our members for all the support you show this channel. It is so very much appreciated. Don't forget to download the Emojam app and try out my new animated audio Emojam. And for YouTube members, of course, try out the 2 member-exclusive Emojams. I cannot wait to find out what you think of them. Until next time.